We do have lots to get to this Wednesday evening.
We do indeed. Just hours ago, we learned prosecutors will seek the death penalty for the man accused of shooting and killing Huntsville police officer Garrett Crumby and injuring officer Albert Morin. Juan Laws is charged with capital murder.
We do have live team coverage from the Madison County Courthouse this afternoon with the very latest updates from today's hearing. Leading our team coverage tonight is WAAY 31's Chris Tatum. Chris?
Marie, you know, the real surprises coming out of this hearing today really had nothing to do with the evidence prosecutors presented. It had more to do with things like how long the hearing lasted, only 30 minutes, and how few police officers were actually in that courtroom, only a handful, and all of them were essential to the actual hearing itself. There were members of Officer Garrett Crumby's family in the courtroom. Also members of accused killer Juan Laws' family were there. As bailiffs walked Laws into that courtroom, Crumby's family members pretty much looked at the floor. They really didn't acknowledge him. A couple of them did squirm, grimace a little bit as they heard some of the evidence, though, those prosecutors laid out, perhaps some evidence they had not heard before. Speaking of that evidence, though, right now I want to link us with my colleague, WAAY 31's Alex Torres Perez. She was also in that courtroom today and tells us more about what evidence we learned.
Well, the testimony today shows that this deadly situation actually all started after a woman called 911 saying that she had been shot by someone. And investigators later found out that that woman was actually Juan Laws' girlfriend. She told investigators that Laws came back home drunk after she spent most of the day trying to figure out where he was. She says Laws was bumping into things, falling over, and even fell asleep on the bathroom floor. And when he woke up, Laws went looking for his guns in the apartment, and that's when he shot her. Now, the girlfriend told investigators she's not sure if he meant to shoot her because Laws wasn't looking at her when the gun went off. And that's when she called 911, and the situation did escalate into a shootout with officers where one died and another was injured. Investigators say more than 20 rounds were fired, and during the standoff, investigators say the girlfriend dropped two kids out of the apartment window to a deputy below before she also jumped out. Meanwhile, investigators say Laws was calling his family, telling them he was bleeding out in the apartment after being shot in the leg, and those family members were able to convince Laws to turn himself in and even came out today to show their support.
There wasn't anything surprising today. I'd just ask anybody, who hears this to keep an open mind. I think in the final analysis, they're probably going to see a young man for whom this act was way outside of his character.
Now, a judge did find there was probable cause and sent this case over to a grand jury to decide whether or not Laws will go to trial. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty because it did involve the death of a Huntsville police officer. And I'll go more into details about what's next in this case on WAAY 31 News at 6. Chris?
Alex, thank you for that update. A lot of evidence did come out today, as you said. We also, of course, know from lawyers on both sides of this case that even with this case bound over to a grand jury, it's still going to take a while. Defense lawyers say probably at least a year before the grand jury will even come back with an indictment in this case. Prosecutors admit that some of the evidence they're counting on to build this case is still being examined and tested right now. But I do want to bring in with me right now attorney Will League from the law firm Timberlake and League. And Will, so again, attorneys say some of the evidence they are counting on still not available, was not presented here at this hearing today. Is it even possible that they could come back with a grand jury deciding there's not enough evidence?
Yeah, it's possible. You mentioned there the length of the hearing. Again, a preliminary hearing is to determine whether or not there's probable cause or sufficient enough evidence to bind it over to a grand jury for them to either return an indictment, a true bill, or a no bill. So it is possible. But again, the district attorney's office does not have to present every piece of evidence they have in the case. Now, ultimately, through discovery, they will have to share that with the defense. But again, this hearing is about whether or not there's enough evidence to send it to a grand jury to see if he's going to be indicted for capital murder by a grand jury. And that's a closed-door proceedings. And again, we've had COVID. There's a shortage of Madison County judges. Birmingham has a surplus of 7 or 8 judges. We are still behind in judges. So with as many capital cases as Huntsville has, we're a growing city. it takes time. And so, yes, it is possible it's possible they would come back with a no bill or with not indicting. It's unlikely given the evidence, I believe. However, that is possible.
So what is the possibility, of course, that this grand jury, that prosecutors, I mean to say, actually, well, I guess what I want to ask you, let me think of it a different way, is prosecutors, of course, with this now being a death penalty case, does that add to the burden on them to prove their case to get to that death penalty point?
Well, it's still beyond a reasonable doubt. And so remember, the Alabama law changed in 2017. So if it goes to trial and the jury recommends life or death, the judge cannot override the jury's decision. Up until 2017, let's say the jury recommended life and the judge says, no, the conduct is so bad that it warrants death. They could change that. And so at this point in Alabama law, the judge cannot override the jury.
All right. Will Lee, thank you for joining us for this legal analysis this afternoon. We, of course, will have Alex Torres Perez here at the courthouse for you at 6 with more about what we learned from today's hearing. Right now, reporting live from the Madison County Courthouse, Chris Tatum, WAAY 31 News.